Attention, attention please. Stand by for another episode of
When Humanists Attack.
Hi, thanks for joining us on When Humanists Attack. My name is Roger Smith, and this is part 2 of my interview with Lukas West. Let's get right back at it. Dysphoria is a word I had heard and was becoming comfortable with, but I think you're the first person I've heard use in conversation with me the adjective form, dysphoric. Is it in fact the opposite of euphoria and euphoric? Are you experiencing it now that you've come out?
Yes and no. So gender dysphoria is the opposite of gender euphoria. It is much more commonly felt than gender euphoria. Gender dysphoria is a diagnosable medical condition. Gender euphoria is not, because it doesn't hinder your life. It's just happiness. I have only experienced gender euphoria once in my life. I went skateboarding with my brother, and I was trying a different kind of binding, which is called open chest binding. It's not a garment, and the skin of the sternum is exposed. I went skateboarding with my brother, and I went down a hill, and I felt the wind on that little bit of my bare chest. And I just felt like a cis boy. I felt like I had a male body for a split second. And it was this overwhelming feeling of euphoria. I just dropped my skateboard in the grass and just laid there and laughed for 15 minutes. And my brother was like, dude, are you okay? And I was like, I have never been more okay.
That does describe it.
Yep.
One of my basic questions as I was thinking about talking to you was, to try to get a sense of what does it feel like to feel like a boy, like a girl, like a male, like a female, as opposed to feeling like yourself, like oneself, like a human in a body without the gender fuck.
For example, take a pronoun. If I were to talk about you in a sentence and I were to say, yeah, Roger, she's really cool and I really like her and she has really cool glasses and she has a great painting on the wall. You don't connect with those words. You're not like, wait, that's me. You're like, excuse me? Like, what? It's kind of like that. I don't know. It's this weird disconnect, and it's hard to describe because obviously you can't know what I feel and I can't know what you feel. And I don't know what it's like to feel like a girl or to feel non-binary, but I know that for me, feeling like a boy means that if I think about being referred to as male and being referred to with he, him pronouns and being seen socially as a male, it makes me feel happy and comfortable. Being referred to as female makes me very uncomfortable and very unhappy. And I know that being referred to as non-binary makes me kind of like, okay, you're going through a lot more trouble than I'm asking you to go through, but congrats. Anybody can be referred to with they, them pronouns. It's just a normal part of the English language.
Well, becoming increasingly normal, I hope.
Oh, it's always been very normal. I mean, if you're on the phone with a telemarketer and you don't know what gender they are, what do you call them? I just use they, them in a sentence. Like someone says like, hey, someone left their water bottle in the gym. That doesn't sound weird. You say that all the time. In the context of having to have that referred to, so something that people are unsure about and don't know a lot about makes it seem a lot scarier.
Tell about your friends as you were going through this and how they viewed and either helped or didn't.
So first you have to understand that I have 3 different groups of friends. I have my RPGing middle school group of friends. And then I have my queer, chaotic group of friends from freshman year. And then I have this group that I'm not really hanging out with much anymore, but we're still friends. So the first group, the RPG friends, when I told them that I might be questioning my gender in 8th grade, they immediately started brainstorming new names for me. First thing they did, they were like, yeah, we can use other pronouns now.
Ooh,
what
let's roll
other
up a new
name?
character.
I'm like, yeah, that's the spirit. My queer friends are very queer, and they were all like, okay, can I support you? My trans friend, my trans mask friend, bought me my first binder, which is really kind of them as a birthday present.
Folks you hadn't met until high school.
Yeah, most of them. Yeah. And then the third group of people who I'm not really hanging out with anymore, but I'm still friends with, they were all kind of like, okay, cool. A lot of people were just kind of like, yeah, that actually fits you a lot better. And I'm like, right? The interesting thing about names is I tried out maybe 3 or 4 names before I settled on Lukas.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the interesting thing was the biggest contender in the race for the name was Theo, short for Theodore. And I asked my friends to call me Theo. And it took them a while. And then when I settled on Lukas and I asked them to call me Lukas, it took them a day. Everyone was like, wait, that is you. Lukas really fits you. And I'm like, yeah, it really does. And it really didn't take people long to switch over because it just fit. So that was cool.
Great to get that kind of confirmation, I'm sure. Yeah. In the period of time since you've been out, others have started to bring their intergender concerns towards you, and you've been able to offer help. Tell us some about that.
Yeah. Shortly after I came out, actually, shortly meaning like 8 months, 10 months, something like that, I started figuring myself out. I had myself figured out pretty good. I didn't have my name yet, but I had my pronouns. I was changing my pronouns, all that stuff. I had myself figured out pretty good. And one of my friends came to me and was like, hey, Lukas, I think I might be trans. And I was like, all right, let's talk about this. So I talked with them about my internal process and compared it with theirs. And we had a lot of long conversations, mostly online, some of them in person. And they ended up coming out and are now living their wonderful non-binary life. And then over the years, a lot in my sophomore year and a lot in my junior year, and a couple more recently, friends have just come to me and they've been like, hey, I've been questioning my gender and you seem like the right person to ask. I've helped, at this point, I think 4 people come out to their families, and I'm actively mentoring 3 people.
What are the type of ways you're able to offer concrete help in this process?
I answer a lot of questions about the internal processes. I answer a lot of questions about dysphoria and comparing dysphoria, because as a trans person, there is so much doubt because you can never really know. I don't know if I feel like a boy because I don't know what it is to feel like anything other than me. You don't really know.
So I was asking.
Yeah, you just know how you respond to society. So there's so much doubt. And I'm kind of cracking open a fresh can of doubt as I move towards some more intense medical transition personally. Just helping to talk through some of the doubt, not necessarily saying, yes, you are trans, don't worry about it, but saying, all right, let's look at what it is. Because I think an assumption that a lot of people have is only trans people question their gender. And I think personally, that's stupid. That is stupid as all hell. In the HSA, the Health Sciences Academy, I took a class on human growth and development. And as part of that, we learned about James Marcia. Now, James Marcia talked about 4 stages of identity development based on the presence or absence of, give me 1 second to conjure up the words, crisis and commitment.
Crisis and commitment.
Yep.
Okay.
And James Marcia has 4 stages of identity development, but they're not like you click one off, you go to the next. You can fluctuate between them. Well, there's one that's kind of...
Well, it sounds like Erikson's model of human development, which is 8, but crisis and commitment could describe those, the crux of each.
It's a little different than Erikson. Erikson really talked about, at this stage of life, this is what's happening. And at this stage of life, this is what's happening. And Marcia more talked about crisis is questioning, any kind of questioning. And commitment is making a decision. Foreclosure, which is what most people have in with their gender identity. Commitment with no crisis. You haven't thought about it, but you have an answer. Someone who has foreclosure, their parents have been telling them that they're going to Harvard ever since they were little, and now they're going to Harvard. They haven't thought about where they want to go to college. They were just told, you're going to Harvard, and they were like, okay, I'm going to Harvard.
Way more of the actual slots in the Harvard undergrad class are given to twerps like that.
Yeah. There's identity achievement. Identity achievement, which is crisis with commitment. You've thought about it, you've made a decision. In the college example, someone who is at the stage of identity achievement has thought about where they want to go to college, looked at a couple of colleges, and chosen the one that they like the most. There is identity diffusion.
Effusion?
Yes, there's diffusion, identity diffusion, which is no crisis and no commitment, complete apathy. That is someone who's like, I haven't thought about college and I'm not going to. And then there's moratorium. Moratorium, which is crisis with no commitment. You don't know where you're going. You're freaking out entirely. You're just like, oh my God, there's so many options. I don't know what to choose. And those are the 4 stages of identity development. And now you can see how they're different from Erickson's. In terms of gender, most people are in foreclosure. They're told, hey, you're a boy. And then they were like, okay, I guess I'm a boy. And they never think about it. Where I'm at, and a lot of the people who I've talked to, and even cis people who I've talked to are at, is identity achievement. We've thought about our gender, and we've looked at the evidence, and we've made an informed decision. Either male, female, or some other option, non-binary, gender fluid, anything like that. Very few people are in a state of identity diffusion with their gender. I haven't thought about my gender and I'm not going to is not generally a statement that you hear. So that's identity
right. It's
diffusion.
Neither medically advisable nor really,
right.
socially
That's
feasible.
Yeah, that's like someone whose parents didn't gender them when they were born, and then they just never thought about it, and they're just like, and they don't have it's not really applicable. Where a lot of the people who I mentor are scared that they're stuck at is moratorium. They're in moratorium. They have a crisis, but no commitment. They haven't settled on the identity that feels right for them yet. And they're questioning and they're questioning. And where they get really scared is they think they're going to be there forever. And I'm like, you're not. It may take years. It may take dozens of years. But at some point, you will find an answer. Even if that answer is, I don't know. But you will find an answer. I implore everyone to think about their gender. And it doesn't have to be long. They can just be like, do I actually think I identify with my body and the gender I'm socially given? And the answer might be yes, and that's fine. But you've thought about it, and that's what's important. And that's part of bringing awareness, because everyone at some point in their life questions their sexuality. They just do. You see Jude Law on screen for the first time, you're like, oh, fuck, maybe I am gay. Maybe not. But you have that moment of like, maybe. And if you turn out to be some form of queer in your sexuality, great. You figured that out. You had an awakening. It's important to question and not just take the answers that you're given.
That last sound bite sounded like it had the ring of advocacy to it. What does it mean to you acting as an advocate or activist?
It's very important to me, especially a lot of this trans activism stuff is very important to me because it's directly applicable to me and to a lot of people that I know and love dearly.
I imagine your interest in the science of the body has been a great help in this respect.
Absolutely. And the fact that I am fascinated about all kinds of stuff about hormones and human development, because if I wasn't, I'd be like, gosh, I don't want to do all that research. As it is, I enjoy teaching people. I enjoy informing people about this gender thing. I really like it because it feels like I'm doing something good. Fortunately, I rarely get the opportunity to educate someone who has entirely adverse beliefs to me. But I have had that opportunity to interact with people who believe that me, not what I'm doing, but me, that my identity is incorrect or wrong or gross in some way. Gross is in disgusting, not as in large. Although my gender identity certainly is very large.
Gender
Very
identity.
gross gender identity it is.
I think the whole concept is really kind of gross when you think about it.
Yeah, gender. I was talking with one of my friends. This is one of the friends who I helped to come out as non-binary. So I was talking with them and I was like, yeah, my gender dysphoria really just makes me want to have a male body, but what does yours do? You're non-binary. And they just looked at me and they were like, I want to be a shapeless cryptid. And I'm like, you know what? That's a mood. That's it. That is the vibe for today.
Maybe you can help educate me some or alleviate some of my befuddlement, because certainly there's a lot of tricky political and social and ideological kind of issues related to transgender people as a category, their civil rights. Certainly, there's been the sharp increase in the past few years in young people asserting a trans identity. It just wasn't really on society's radar to this extent 20 or more years ago, or barely even 10 years ago. There's a lot of pressure on your generation. I presume this has something to do with the increase in trouble with gender identity.
I honestly don't know. I don't think we have enough proof and enough data to determine whether it is causation or correlation. With people being like, all these new genders, it's kind of the same thing as when like gay people became more accepted. It's like, bisexual, what does that even mean? And they were like, wait, but gay people didn't exist before the 1970s. And it's like, actually, they did. You just threw them in mental health asylums. Even as trans people keep coming out and being more prominent, it's still only around 3% of people that are trans in America.
It's 3% already sounds like an order of magnitude higher than.
Oh, it's large. Oh, it's large. But compared to what a lot of transphobes would lead you to believe, they're not making all of your daughters men now. They're not making all your sons women. The transgender agenda is to live happy and functional lives. That's it. It's kind of that sign of someone in your community being out and happy as trans. It's kind of that sign to other people who may be questioning their gender of like, hey, it's okay to do that. And if it's a community where there is a trans person or a couple of trans people who are out, but they're ostracized and they are constantly harassed and there's just constant slander against them, that might signal to people who are questioning their gender, hey, don't try.
As an issue of human rights and civil rights, it seems to be boiling down to a demand to respect how some individuals see themselves and define themselves, make a claim for their own identity.
When someone's like, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel really uncomfortable and sad, and I'd prefer it if you do this other thing, and it is related to gender, and I prefer it if you thought of me as this gender and used these pronouns. It's part of just being a decent human being to be like, yes, I will go through a tiny inconvenience so you can be not depressed.
The inconvenience being what exactly?
An argument you hear a lot is that it's really inconvenient to switch pronouns or switch a name or put a gender-neutral bathroom in your building. Oh, well, that's 0.1% more work than I was planning to do today. Whereas to the trans person, it's like, hi, could you help me just live, please?
I saw on the ACLU's webpage, they're fighting to make it easier for trans people to obtain driver's licenses or IDs that reflect their claimed gender identity, not their natal sex.
So I recently changed my name legally and also got the papers to get a gender marker change. Unfortunately, I live near Burlington, which has a transgender clinic, and I was able to go there and talk to them, and they just gave me the papers that say, yeah, this person can get their gender marker changed. But trans clinics are far and few between, and you have to go to a doctor that will give you those papers in order to change your gender marker. Doctors, especially like general practitioners, like family medicine people, as much as they're supposed to be loving and supporting and there for you, can be really insensitive about a lot of things. Just even a slightest bit of, hey, I'm trans, can I get a gender marker change? And the doctor being like, what? That's someone who you're reaching out to for support, who should be able to support you, who then isn't.
It seems like on one level, what we're talking about is a pretty straightforward issue about respecting the rights and the dignity of a minority of human beings. But on another level, I think the trans issue opens up questions and paradoxes that are unique. And also, I'm gathering that the cultural temperature seems so high around the issues that dialogue about it is getting pretty difficult.
It is difficult to talk about because there are questions that just keep getting asked every time you talk about it with someone. And there's a point where you're like, you know what? I'm done with this. I don't need to answer this question for you. I have to remind myself that this person has like a genuine interest. And this person actually like wants to know about stuff. And like they're not trying to be insensitive. But then at the same time, it's like, this is the like 5th time someone has asked me if I'm sure that I'm trans in a week. It gets tiring. And I have a couple of stories about people just really being insensitive with asking questions. Before I came out, I was catcalled and followed and verbally harassed on the street between the ages of 10 and 14. I actually haven't been catcalled at all after I came out because I was more male presenting. One time I was driving down to Boston. We were in the gas station getting some food. They'd already gotten their food and they were heading back to the car, and I was in the aisle grabbing some Reese's Pieces, and this guy walked up to me and just went, "Hey buddy, you got a dick?" And I just dropped the Reese's Pieces and ran out of the gas station. I was like, I'm not answering. I'm not interacting with you anymore because that is what? Every time I walk into a male public bathroom, I have to come at peace with myself that there is a chance that I will not walk out of that bathroom. Because trans people get harassed, beat up, and murdered every year. And I kind of feel like I'm overdue for a hate crime, which sounds horrible to say, but I'm 16.
It's horrible to hear.
Right. I'm 16. I've been out and proud for 3.5 years. I feel like I'm overdue for a hate crime. I haven't been physically assaulted or harassed at all. And I'm like, when's the other shoe gonna drop? And I'm leaving for a gap year pretty soon. And I really wish I could say that I wasn't a little bit terrified that I'm not going to make it through my gap year without a majorly traumatic event. And I talked with a couple of my trans and queer friends, and I was like, hey, do you guys have this assumption that at some point there will be a hate crime done against you? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. They're just like, yeah, 100%. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of depressing. And they're like, yep, it is. We're all teenagers, and we all feel pretty certain that at some point we're going to be beat up by someone or assaulted in some other way. And it's just something that we live with. The thought that
it is the opposite of a privilege.
Yeah. And that's why people are like, oh, gender neutral bathrooms, it doesn't matter that much. I'm like, really? You sure? I have had situations where I've had to go into the women's bathroom because there are no trash cans in the stalls of the men's bathroom. So there's no way to dispose of a period product without carrying it out into the center place and throwing it in the public trash can, which I am not going to do. So there are times when I have to go into the women's bathroom, and I have had mothers draw their children in closer. I have had people gasp. I have had people stare. I have had people inform me that I'm in the wrong bathroom a lot. I have had one lady, I walked in and she went, and I was like, move along, ma'am. I don't have time for this. Guys don't interact with each other in the bathroom. It's something I've noticed. You guys, men go in, do their business.
Hey, don't you guys me.
In my experience in women's bathrooms, it's like washing your hands like, oh, hey, Cassandra, it's so nice to see you. Oh my God, I love your hair color. It's going great. People talking, people doing their makeup, and it's a social event, the bathroom. But also, cis men, y'all are getting cheated out of clean bathrooms. I'm sorry, you guys, compared to the women's bathrooms, men's bathrooms are disgusting. the whole time. Like 99% of them. Like, I don't even want to know, like, when there's like gendered bathroom in a gas station, if someone comes back from the women's bathrooms, like, it was really gross, and then someone comes back from the men's bathrooms and is like, it was really gross. The women's bathroom, she means like there was graffiti and there was like toilet paper on the floor. The person coming back from the men's bathroom probably means that someone had shit on the floor. There are some like funny gender things like that I've now noticed after like presenting as male.
Yeah, well, and having been raised, female.
Yeah, it's really, it's interesting because I get the social experience of both being perceived as female and male. Let me tell you, very different. Very, very different.
I think you've already given examples that fall on both sides of the ledger in terms of it being advantageous or disadvantageous for your future.
Yeah. And honestly, sometimes I think about my future. I'm like, I'm gonna do great things. I'm gonna be a doctor. I'm gonna be, a trans person out on the world. And then sometimes I think about my future. I'm like, I'm gonna be dead in the ditch before I'm 26. The latter is probably not very likely, but it's a possibility.
Less likely than a hate crime sometime between now and then.
But you gotta joke about it, because otherwise it crushes you. I'm Gen Z. We joke about the dark things. Like, I joke with my friends, like, yeah, I gotta get back to martial arts lessons for the fucker that tries to hate crime me. And like, that's funny. We all have a laugh. And then someone jokes about their depression, and then we all go home and cry. That was a joke. Coping mechanisms.
Well, I wonder whether you feel there are physical or physiological things that you are wanting to change, about how you are. I mean, you have some questions about possible medical interventions in your future, I guess.
Yeah. Currently, I'm looking at getting top surgery, so that would be a double mastectomy, somewhere between next August and next October. So we're looking at
so still in the before you turn 18 range.
Well, I'd love to do it before October because I'd love to get like the full bit of my gap year, as much as my gap year as I can, without being stuck in Vermont recovering from surgery. And it's often accompanied, though not in my case, by hormone replacement therapy. So in a transmasculine case, testosterone, and transfeminine case, estrogen. And mastectomy is only applicable in a transmasculine case. I'm pretty much every day dysphoric about my chest, and binding is becoming less and less of an option as I go on. So when I first came out, I told everybody else to kind of stop them from freaking out that I didn't want to medically transition for a while. I said not until after college, but as time has gone on, I'm like, that is not possible. I cannot wait that long. I've waited for 3.5 years, and it's...
So the sense of dissonance is a kind of pressure that you feel building.
You have this discomfort and this sadness every day, and then you have it for a bit, and then you're like, okay, you know what? I think I'll be able to deal with this for a while, and I'll just be able to move on. And then you don't move on, and it just comes back, and it comes back, and it comes back, and it's just constantly intrusive in your life. And at some point, you're like, I'm done. I'm fucking done. I can't take any more of this.
Well, I guess there is the possibility or the likelihood, perhaps, that in some time in the future, you'll be thinking about intervening in your body's hormonal balance.
Yeah, maybe, probably. I don't know. Testosterone tends to be an all or nothing deal. And there are some things that I'm not very comfortable with that are changes of testosterone.
What do you mean all or nothing?
You can't pick and choose what effects you have.
Uh-huh.
And there are some effects that I'm like, I don't 100% want that. But a lot of the other effects, fat redistribution and lowering of the voice and body hair growth, all are very desirable. But as I said, testosterone is a all or nothing deal. And until I'm certain that I want all, I'm going to go with nothing. Something that is a personal pet peeve of mine is that people generally assume that trans people owe them proof in order for those people to respect their identity. For some reason, I owe some random stranger proof that what I have known is true in my heart of hearts for a long time is actually true. I just don't see a point of argument. If given the option between do a nice thing for someone and interrogate them about something that they're struggling with, I don't understand why you would choose to interrogate them.
Perhaps the weight of the issue might fall a little harder on a person born into a male body and becoming a trans woman. Maybe a little bit more. I mean, those are the ones supposedly to be feared in the bathroom.
Trans women do get a lot more shit than trans men because they don't have the benefit, and I hate saying that it's a benefit, but they don't have the benefit of being fetishized by cishet men. The whole turfy argument is that trans women are men who invade female spaces to be sexual predators. A trans person, especially a trans woman, is insanely fucking likely to get harassed, abused, or murdered in a bathroom. Or sexually assaulted. There is an overwhelming number of trans people, especially trans women, who are sexually assaulted in bathrooms each year. No one is concerned for their safety. Everyone's concerned for their poor self-safety.
They're perceived as the dangerous one in the situation, but they're actually the endangered one.
Exactly. I'm a lot more uncomfortable sharing a bathroom with a cis person who is obsessed with strangers' genitals than I am sharing a bathroom with a trans person. Because trans women are women. Trans women are women. They are different from cis women. Just like black women are different from Caucasian women. Or a short woman is different from a tall woman. They're different, but they are all women. I have talked to trans women about this subject, and they're like, yeah, people think that you're automatically a sexual predator just because you have a penis. A lot of trans women don't have the experience of being raised female, which means they have entirely different life experiences. But that doesn't mean that they aren't women. Just like I have had the experiences of a female person in regards to sexual harassment doesn't mean that I'm not a man. I've heard a lot of people be like, oh, I'm fine with trans men, but I don't get trans women. It's like, okay, we're back to this all or nothing deal.
That just seems like a silly one. I spoke about this with my girlfriend. She said she's never cared that much about being in women-only spaces. But I know some women do feel a strong sort of connection to some sense of safety or solidarity in sisterhood. Bathrooms, I guess, being just one example of such a space. And so I think that my friend's concern has been that people with penises on their bodies can enter those spaces just by claiming to be women.
Right. Yeah, because they are women.
Yes, in almost a Freudian sense. What about the penis in the room?
I actually wrote an essay about this. Female-only spaces, in terms of like safe spaces that are like constructed by campuses, do have the option of saying this is a space for those with female-bodied experience. Let's say you want to talk about periods and catcalling and bras. You can say this is for those with female-bodied experience. And then you're not allowed to be upset if a trans man shows up and asks to use he, him pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have specified that is for someone with female-bodied experience. If you specify that is just for women, a trans woman is a woman. Just because she may have a prostate doesn't mean that she's not a woman, and doesn't mean that she doesn't experience catcalling and doesn't buy bras. also I've heard a lot of arguments that are like, trans women aren't women because they can't have babies. It's like, okay, 13% of American women are infertile. Are you saying that they are not women? This disregard for this basic human kindness that you can do for another person because it makes you mildly uncomfortable. And I wish I wouldn't be so upset about it if actual legitimate conversation wasn't shut down so frequently. If they were open to talking about it and to hearing a trans woman's side of the argument. But in all experiences that I have had, people who have these views are not. They don't want to talk. They just want to yell.
Perhaps you can say that the conversation that we've had may disabuse you of this notion. I don't want to yell, nor do I want, you to be mad at me or think that I'm conducting hate speech by asking these questions,
Right. An important side of it is patience and tolerance with people who are genuinely curious and genuinely asking. And that is perfectly all right. And that is great because then there's the opportunity for education. But there are a lot of situations, like certain fantasy authors that will go unnamed.
Some of the people being branded as trans exclusionary, like one person I know.
Yeah, let's talk about TERFs. I will be using the term TERF, which stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist, which means a person who is a self-identified feminist who believes that trans women are not women and that trans men are in fact confused lesbians.
I know it created a lot of consternation. Do you want to expand upon it?
I haven't read a lot of it because it's infuriating to read. She said something along the lines of, oh, if we're getting rid of biological sex now, I might as well throw away my womanhood. Whoa, okay, let's unpack that for a second. We're not getting rid of biological sex. We are revisualizing what the word gender means. Secondly, a trans person's or a trans woman's identity does not have any effect on your identity and does not invalidate you at all. And third of all, what the fuck? Come on. But there was a big response from both the trans and the allied community, which was really great. When I first started questioning my gender, I was so lost and I needed a place that felt like home. So I reread Harry Potter. So that was kind of a sick turn of events. When she was like, hey, I don't like trans people. I was like, come on. You got it.
Right. Sort of how I feel about Woody Allen.
Yeah.
I can't watch any of his movie anymore. And then there's the sports example that came up when we were talking about the Castor Semenya, right? Like, I mean, sports is a real gendered space, right?
So I'm going to say it. I'm just going to come out and say it. Gendered sports are stupid. Gendered sports are the dumbest shit.
Gendered sports are the problem.
Gendered sports are so dumb. Like, oh my God. Boys lacrosse and girls lacrosse have different sets of rules.
Mm-hmm.
You're not allowed to be aggressive in physically aggressive in girls lacrosse, and it's encouraged in boys lacrosse. What? There are also women with PCOS who have very high levels of testosterone. Biological women, XX chromosomes. Polycystic ovarian syndrome. What do we do for someone who has XXY chromosomes? Are they in the male sports or the female sports?
The trend should be to think in terms of overcoming gender or gender limitations, perhaps loosening this fold we all have down the center of our brains.
If you're given a star-shaped block and you're told to put it in a square hole or a circular hole, you cut a star-shaped hole. With segregation, they weren't like, oh, maybe we can rethink how we do our Jim Crow laws. We'll rethink this. Maybe we'll move Black people to the middle of the bus. No, they were like, let's scrap the segregation. It's fucked.
So many things about how we've done society and culture will have to be overcome if we are going to expect to survive for more than another generation or two.
Oh yeah, I think there's a great change coming and I can't wait.
I want to thank you, Lukas, for your time, for your clarity. and for indulging your interlocutor's befuddlement.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, the viewer, for attending When Humanists Attack all the way to the end of the video. So you must like us. So like us, as they do on the thingy, and subscribe and donate and obey and join and build and be our slave. Thank you so much. Until next time.